When you hear the phrase, the engine no one could control, it sounds almost mythical. A machine so wild, so unpredictable, that even the best engineers couldn't fully tame it. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, that myth was real. And one man proved that, with the right blend of instinct, precision, and courage, chaos could be mastered. His name was Ayrton Senna.
To understand this story, we have to go back to the closing years of the 1980s. Formula One was a battleground of technological escalation. The turbo era had produced monsters, engines capable of producing over 1,000 horsepower in qualifying trim. Cars were rockets with wheels, capable of shredding tires and transmissions in seconds. When the FIA banned turbos after 1988, engine manufacturers had to adapt. Honda, already at the top of the game, was determined not just to survive, but to dominate the new naturally aspirated era. In 1988, McLaren partnered with Honda to develop what would become one of the most dominant combinations in F1 history. The car, the MP4/4, and its 1.5-liter V6 turbo engine, the RA168E, were masterpieces. But what made it infamous was its brutality. The power delivery was savage, the boost unpredictable, and the throttle response almost binary. It wasn't an engine you drove. It was an engine you negotiated with. Every time the turbo spooled, it threatened to break traction, spin the car, or blow itself apart. Most drivers hated it. Senna, on the other hand, thrived on it. Senna's relationship with his engineers was different from any other driver of that era. He didn't simply describe problems, he interpreted them. He could sense minute changes in power delivery, down to how the engine vibrated through the throttle pedal. He often drove with his fingertips on the steering wheel, using delicate micro-adjustments to feel traction. Where most drivers wanted smoother engines, Senna wanted responsiveness. Even if it made the car harder to handle, he wanted to feel everything. When Honda began developing the next generation of engines, the 3.5-liter V10RA109E and later the RA121E V12, they were pushing mechanical limits. These engines revved to over 13,000 RPM and produced close to 750 horsepower, but they were notoriously difficult to control, especially in the transition phases, mid-corner throttle, high-load exits, or braking into bumpy turns. The torque curve wasn't linear. Power surged unpredictably, demanding split-second throttle modulation. For most drivers, that made the car nervous. For Senna, it made the car alive. The early 1990s brought another complication. Electronics were beginning to change F1. Traction control, semi-automatic gearboxes, and advanced telemetry were just beginning to appear. Yet Senna, though always analytical, preferred feeling to relying on systems. He argued that technology should enhance, not replace, the driver's intuition. When he faced engines that no one could control, it wasn't because he had better data. It was because his connection to the car was human, not digital. Honda engineers who worked with Senna recalled how he would test multiple throttle maps in one session, memorizing each curve, describing their differences with uncanny precision. He could detect if ignition timing was off by a few degrees just by how the car reacted under partial throttle. One of the defining moments came during the 1991 season. The McLaren MP4/6, powered by Honda's RA121E V12, was both a marvel and a menace. The engine delivered extraordinary top speed but had violent throttle transitions. On tight circuits like Monaco and Adelaide, the car could easily break traction, yet Senna managed to dance around those circuits as if physics didn't apply. In Monaco, he qualified 1.1 seconds faster than anyone else. In a car, others struggled to keep pointing straight. That weekend, Honda's engineers admitted that Senna was driving a machine they still hadn't figured out how to fully stabilize. And yet somehow he did. To fully appreciate what Senna accomplished, you have to imagine the physical and mental strain. The G-forces were brutal, the cockpit temperatures soared, and the cars had no power steering. When the engine's torque hit suddenly, it could twist the rear suspension, destabilize the chassis, and demand instant correction. Senna was constantly adjusting throttle, brake balance, differential settings, all while reading the track like a living organism. But the story wasn't just about domination. There were moments of pure frustration. When Honda switched from the proven V10 to the heavier, thirstier V12, Senna initially resisted. He feared the extra weight would upset the car's balance. He argued in briefings that more cylinders aren't always better. Yet after testing it, he adapted instantly, discovering how to manipulate gear ratios and braking patterns to compensate. The V12, while almost untamable for most, became his ally. Once again, he proved that control wasn't about force. It was about harmony. Even within McLaren, few understood just how far Senna went to master the uncontrollable. Between sessions, he'd spend hours studying telemetry with the engineers, then go to the simulator to reprogram his muscle memory. He trained his reflexes to anticipate turbo lag, traction loss, and torque spikes before they even happened. Senna didn't react. He predicted. The result was a style that made it look effortless when, in truth, he was managing a machine on the verge of self-destruction every lap. As F1 evolved into the electronic age, Senna found himself at a crossroads. Cars were becoming more manageable. Smoother engines, traction aids, active suspension. For many, that meant progress. For Senna, it meant something else was being lost. The art of control. He once said, "If everything is under control, you're not going fast enough." That quote perfectly captures his relationship with the uncontrollable engines of his prime. He wasn't interested in safety or predictability. He was obsessed with the edge. By 1993, when Honda withdrew from F1 and McLaren switched to Ford Power, Senna often reminisced about the Honda days. Despite their flaws, he respected the engines deeply. The uncontrollable engine wasn't his enemy, it was his partner in creation. And that's what makes this story timeless. When Ayrton Senna drove the engine no one could control, isn't just about a specific race or a technical anomaly. It's a portrait of the ultimate driver-machine relationship. A story about a man who could sense what others couldn't, who could translate chaos into precision, and who turned mechanical violence into poetry. The cars of that era, wild and imperfect, reflected the raw human side of racing. Senna was the translator between human instinct and mechanical power. In the end, that's what separated him from everyone else. It wasn't just his reflexes or bravery, it was his capacity to feel. The uncontrollable engine became a metaphor for Senna himself. Powerful, volatile, brilliant, and untamed. And though the engines have changed, growing quieter and more predictable with each generation, that brief moment in history, when one man tamed the beast that no one else could, remains an eternal reminder of what pure driving really means.